This year was probably the shortest dairy title I've ever had the pleasure of reading because I threw out all the old programs and put one new one in, and that's about it. Well, almost anyway. Let's just very quickly, what about the programs that were renewed? And I'm not going to belabor those, but the Dairy Promotion and Research Program, okay, the checkoff, as most of y'all probably know it, is still around. The Dairy Indemnity Program, which has been around for a long time, it pays a dairy farmer if his milk is taken out of commerce because of contamination from toxic substances, chemicals, radiation, some kind of odd things like that. And the Dairy Forward Pricing Program was renewed. That's the one that allows anybody to forward price with a buyer at lower than the federal market order minimum price if that milk is going into a manufacturing use. Programs that were eliminated is pretty much all the rest of them. The Dairy Price Support Program is gone. That was the one that authorized the Secretary to support milk prices at whatever the prevailing all milk price was by going into the market and purchasing manufactured dairy products. The Dairy Export Incentive Program is gone. That's one that provided a subsidy to exporters so that they could compete on the world market. The Federal Milk Marketing Order Review Commission was never funded nor appointed, and now looks like it probably never will be. Although that's one I wouldn't be surprised to see come back in some future iteration of the Farm Bill. And the Milk Income Loss Coverage Program, abomination though it probably was, or so a lot of people thought, that's also history, or at least it will be as of September 1st or whenever the new support program comes along. Okay, the new programs that were authorized this time around is the Dairy Producer Margin Protection Program. That's sort of the big one that everybody's probably interested in. I was going to ask if we had dairy farmers in the crowd, but I remembered Mr. Duval's forgotten more about dairy farming than I'll know in this lifetime. And the other is the Dairy Product Donation Program. Let's take the easier one of the two first, and I'll say a few things about the donation program. It seems like everything, we've always talked about dairy support prices in terms of what is a milk price. Is a milk price high enough to support production? And what we've seen over the last several years is you can have some pretty substantial milk prices, and if feed prices really spike, it can still ding your bottom line. So everything this time around is sort of predicated on this idea of what kind of a margin do we need? What kind of a difference in a milk price and a feed price, whether they're high or low, the difference is the kind of thing we want to ensure. And it kind of revolves around this baseline of a $4 margin, and that's a difference in an all milk price, so a U.S. all milk price, and a U.S. average feed price. Now, I'll say some more about that in a few minutes. But under the donation program, the Secretary is compelled, if the margin falls below $4 for 2 consecutive months, to go into the market and buy manufactured products to try to bring that margin back up to $4. And they'll purchase products for either 3 months or until the margin exceeds $4. And don't think about that one in reverse. If the margin dips below 4, 3 months is the maximum that they will go into the market and buy products to support the price. Or if it's back above $4 in 1 month, then they're only going to go in the market and buy for 1 month. So that's how that one's going to work. It's sort of like the old support price light, I guess. And the product must be purchased and donated to food banks or feeding programs. There are provisions that prevents it from ever being sold back into the market to compete with other products that are out there for sale. And the purchases are suspended if the U.S. price rises above the world price by more than 5%. And the thinking there was, if margins are just bad across the whole world, there needs to be some kind of relief valve to let prices regulate themselves.
And in this context, when you're saying margin, you're talking about price of milk, price of feed too?
I am. I'm going to give you some details on that, but that's exactly what we mean. And I might have got the cart before the horse a little bit on that. So let's talk about the Margin Protection Program. And it supports, like I said, it supports margins instead of price levels this time. And it's designed to protect against really sort of 2 things that we've seen in the last decade or so. And one of those is catastrophically low margins when there's, say, a drought and feed prices are through the roof, and the other is chronic or really prolonged low margins like we might have seen in the early 2000s when dairying was abysmal for years at a time. And this is to start no later than September 1st, 2014. Of course, this administration has missed a deadline or two, I've noted in the past, but that's supposed to be the drop-dead date for implementation. So remember that, like everybody else, I'm flying by the seat of my pants, and there are no real rules in place for this yet. The MILC program will operate until this program is online, or until September 1st, and then it goes away. And it is triggered by 2 months, 2 consecutive months of margins that are below $4. And it's not a rolling 2 months, it's pairs of 2 months starting with January, February, then March, April, and so on all the way through November, December. That has a lot to do with how the margins are calculated. All right, who is eligible for this? Well, any dairy farmer in the country is eligible, but it's voluntary, and you must sign up if you want to participate. If there are multiple owners of a single operation, that's treated as one dairy operation. So if you're partners with your father, brother, brother-in-law, whatever the case may be, own a single farm, a single plot of land, that's considered one operation. But if you're a farmer that owns several separate entities, several separate farms around the country, then those are treated as multiple operations for sign-up. There is an annual administrative fee of $100 to sign up. And this cannot be used in conjunction with the livestock gross margin program. There's a dairy section of that. And the intent, at least, and we've talked a lot about intent this morning, y'all are all familiar with the road that's paved with good intentions, I know, but is that dairy farmers are either going to pick the LGM dairy program or the margin protection program, and they're going to be committed to that for, assumedly, the term of the Farm Bill, so 5 years. They're not looking to have it set up and rules written to where you can participate in LGM dairy this year because it looks a little more attractive, and then next year you see something a little different on the price horizon and you switch over to the margin protection program and bounce back and forth. However, and I'm not sure I put a bullet in here, but if you are signed up and committed to the margin protection program, you are going to have some options to change your parameters in that every year. Okay, so how does it work? It's tied to an average national dairy margin. So I know a lot of the specifics are couched in terms of a premium payment and an indemnity, and it does look a lot like insurance, but it's tied, it's essentially still at the heart of it, I'm going to say it's a subsidy tied to national average prices. It's administered through FSA, unlike the LGM dairy, which is administered through the Risk Management Agency. And this is not one that is contracted out to private or unique insurers that provide a policy. It's actually insured through FSA. And it starts with this idea of an insurable base. And that, if you sign up, is your highest production year between 2011 and 2013. And you're allowed to grow that base at a national average milk production growth. So let's say an average milk production growth over the last several years has been 2% nationally. You would be able to grow your insurable base under this program by that 2% or whatever that national average is. It doesn't prevent you from producing more milk, but it prevents you from having more that is insured under the program. All right, how does it work? Really very brief example so that I can keep the math straight in my head. Let's say there's an all milk price of $20, and everybody, I know everybody knows what an all milk price is, right? It's just the value of all milk that's produced in the country divided by the quantity of it. So depending on what kind of use it goes into, it'll be priced differently. You just take that big lump sum and divide it by total production. That gives you an all milk price. So let's say that's $20 and your average feed cost was $16, and the average feed cost is a function of U.S. alfalfa prices, U.S. corn prices, and soybean meal prices at Central Illinois. So it's a function of those, and it's based on a feed ration, not just for dairy cows, but for an entire operation. So that feed ration takes into account sick cows, replacement heifers, sort of an average across your entire operation is how that's done. So let's say your all milk price was $20 and your average feed cost was $16. You subtract those out and you had a producer margin of $4. That's kind of the target, at least so far as I've developed this. That would be the target. If, let's say your feed cost went up to $17, so now your national average margin is only $3. Well, the difference in that 3 and the 4, the target, the $1 is what they're going to make up to you under the program per hundredweight. So that would be a dollar subsidy on your base production there. Okay, how does that bounce around? Well, if the all milk price went up by $1 and so did the feed cost, you still got your $4 margin. So, and you generally look historically, and feed costs and milk costs kind of track each other loosely with a little bit of a lag in there. So you're maintaining the difference in those. All right, if your all milk price went down to 19 and your feed cost went up to 17, well, now your margin was $2 and we're trying to insure 4. So now they're going to make up $2 a hundredweight to you on that. All right, you do have some decisions to make within that. $4 is kind of a baseline margin that's going to be insured, but you can opt in and buy some insurance up to as much as $8 a hundredweight, and you can also decide what percentage of your base, of your production, is going to be covered under that. So if you participate, you have to insure a minimum of 25% of your production, and you can insure up to 90%. So I didn't do a very good job of percent of production, so that's sort of the label on that axis. And you can insure somewhere between those two. If you opt in, you must do at least 25. And you can make a premium payment and insure above that $4 level all the way up to $8. Although if you're a dairyman doing this, beware that the premiums go up pretty quickly as you kind of hit $8 a hundredweight. And here is what they actually look like. So on up to 4 million pounds of production, you'll see a column that's a coverage level, starts at $4 and goes up to 8 in increments of 50 cents. And you'll see a premium per hundredweight attached to that. So it costs you $0 to insure the $4 margin. And you see how the premiums go up as you approach $8. And then as you insure over 4 million pounds, again, there's a coverage level. $4 costs you nothing. And up to $8, which costs you $1.36 a hundredweight. So if you're mathematically astute, you kind of realize when you get over 4 million pounds and into about $7.50 and $8 worth of coverage, you're paying more than it's actually going to return to you. All right, I was kind of curious about how this would have played out historically, kind of like your stockbroker tells you, past performance is no indication of what the future is going to look like. But I went out and pulled some data. The green line there is an all milk price, and I know the bottom's kind of hard to read, but that actually goes back to January of 2005 up to January of this year. And my thinking was, first of all, it's all the data I've got. And the other is you could probably look back historically and find some point, as volatile as dairy prices are, that looks a lot like what you expect to see in the future. So the upper line is an all milk price. The black line is the feed cost, that average feed cost based on that data and formulas that I told you about. And if you look at the difference in the two, the light blue line is the margin. And then I drew in a red line where your $4 base margin would be. So you can see that you're not paying anything for $4 coverage, but at the same time it doesn't get you very much. There were a few months back in 2009 and a couple of months in 2012 where your average national margin would have dropped below that $4 demarcation line. But if we drew an $8 line in there, now you see that it's above it about half the time. It's below it about half the time. I need to let that one sink in for a minute. All right, questions? All right, it's all clear as mud. Okay. I was also curious about how that would have played out over time if you just took a position and said, I'll insure at this amount and I'll hold on to that. So historically, and remember this is over a lot of years, but if you had less than 4 million pounds, and it's probably worth mentioning that 4 million is, I'd call it a soft cap instead of a hard cap. So if you produced, 4 million and 1 pounds on your farm, you would have the 4 million, the 4 million or less premium on the first 4 million pounds, and you would have that higher premium on that last 1 pound. Okay, so above 4, you're not categorizing farms and saying this set of premium applies to the small ones and this to the big ones. But if you had just went with $4 coverage and paid no premium over that whole period of time, well, obviously your premium would have been nothing. You would have picked up $27,850 in indemnity payments for those few months. And this is on 4 million pounds with $4 margin. So this would be the equivalent of a really big farm insuring a part of its production, or a small farm maybe insuring 90%. You would have picked up indemnities of $27,850. All right, if you had paid a little money out and invested in insuring a $6 margin, over that time you would have paid out $20,167 in insurance premiums, and you would have picked up $137,886 in indemnity payments. So you would have came out pretty good there. And if you had been a big spender and sprung for the $8 margin insurance, you would have paid out over that period of time $174,167 in premium payments, but you would have picked up $334,122 in indemnity payments. Remember, when you really got into that $8 margin, you were below that about half the time. So this sort of tells you that if you expect low margins, you're probably in good shape to go ahead and insure up to the maximum there. And just for curiosity, and then I'll sit down and shut up, if you went more, if you were insuring above 4 million pounds, so let's say you insured another 4 on top of that, and your premiums start to go up, on that second 4, you would have paid premium payments of $56,883, and you would have picked up indemnity payments of $137,886. So you start to see those higher margins kicking in. And just to do one more, if you had insured an additional 4 million pounds at the higher rate, now you would have been paying out a lot more money over that time than you would have seen coming in payments. So
Why would anybody do that?
I would assume they priced it that way to prevent it. Now, why would you even include it?
Why offer it? That's
Yeah, it beats the heck out of me. But yeah, you can look at the schedule and see you're paying more to insure that hundredweight of milk than you're ever going to see back out of it. I don't know, if you were a really big farm and needed the margin and a few cents a hundredweight swings one way or the other, maybe you could sit down and contrive a situation where you might actually use it, but I haven't thought that far ahead yet. So it seems like if you expect margins to be above $8 and you've signed up, you would probably say my annual decision would be to insure 25%. Well, no, your premium's nothing at $4, so just insure 90%. And if you expected, so you'd kind of want the minimum payout if you didn't expect the margin to fall below that threshold. If you expected really terrible margins like $3 or $4, then I think you'd probably want to do 90% at $8. But that goes to how well do you predict those margins. And I think if you look at this year's just based on commodity futures prices, you'd be probably close to $9 margin this time.